Hello, everybody. Welcome to this episode of the Pursuing Horizons podcast. Today, Rob and I have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Marc Morris. Mark is actually the owner of NCA, which was the Dr. Mark Method coaching program for nutrition. So I actually got certified through them, and that was a wonderful course. But
Amazing.
first of all, thank you so much for coming on today.
Hey, thanks for having me on. I'm excited to I know you guys put so much effort into your podcast and it's great and getting an invitation to be able to just chat nutrition coaching and the state of the industry. I'm glad and happy for the opportunity.
Oh, thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you.
So first things first, let's hear your lore. Let's hear your backstory. What got you into coaching? What
Oh
made you want
man.
to pursue your PhD and everything like that?
Oh, that's a great question in terms of I'm not sure I wanted to pursue my PhD. I actually came at it from um, what's the opposite of altruistic? I had a very specific intention with grad school. But if we take a few steps back with just like I was a high school kid interested in sports, wanted to gain some muscle, fell in love with the weight room, was albeit like I don't know, admittedly like a science minded smart kid that kind of was trying to find my way in the world. I applied for university. At first, it was general science. Like I was like, okay, what do I want to do? Do I want to teach? Do I want to high school teacher? Do I want to go into like health science in terms of like pharmacy or maybe med school or something? I'll just apply to go into a general science program. And I ended up going to a university that like some of my friends were going to, and I liked the kind of the atmosphere, and I just wanted to like I knew I wanted a university, but I wanted to hang out with them, so I ended up going to Wilfrid Laurier University. But they put me in they kind of squashed their general program and put me in the chemistry program in the first year. And I remember being like, what am I supposed to do with this? But I talked to a counselor and they're like, the first year is so general anyway that this is just a title. And I was like, okay, I'll do it. Got into it, ended up liking the people I was going to school with, and ended up just like going through the entire process of getting a chemistry degree and kind of being like, I don't know what I want to do here. And I remember through that process, all my friends were really into it. They wanted to be like synthetic organic chemists. They wanted to design drugs and they wanted to be in the lab and all that stuff. And my lab during that period was like, I'm reading on T Nation and bodybuilding.com and spending all my time in the weight room and thinking like, how am I gonna, like, how am I gonna do this stuff? Like, how am I gonna make these worlds match? Because at the time, it was very much like there's kinesiology over here. There was like more lab science over here. These people didn't talk. There wasn't coaching. There wasn't like podcasts. There's basically like threads on the internet that I was like reading. So I ended up learning that I could probably go to grad school and take my lab science stuff and learn it and apply it in a specific way to like a more specific topic like nutrition and realized, hey, there's people like looking for scientists that are doing this stuff. Maybe I can do grad school in nutrition and start down the path of like like working with people and getting more close to that. So I applied for grad school, ended up like getting accepted into a master's program for nutrition, which I found out if I just made it longer, I could turn it into a PhD. And through that time was like, with my advisors, like, I'd like to write books. I'd like to contribute to this field. I don't really want to be uh, uh, like a professor long term. Is that okay? And they're like, that is okay as long as you take the steps. So I ended up like being like, you know, there's a few books. Oh, for example, I was my vision for all this stuff originally was like, I want to be able to when I can write
Oh
books, I
man.
want to make sure that like there's stuff like that on there. How do I
Yeah,
do
man.
this? And essentially just been like reverse engineering the process of like wanting specific things and then working backwards in terms of how do I get that and get there. And that's kind of where I am now. Does that
Wow.
answer your question? I don't know.
Yeah. I knew it was gonna cue so many things from me too. First of all, Wilfrid Laurier, go Golden Hawks,
That's
I
right. You
think.
bet. Yeah.
Yeah. What year did you grad there?
2009.
Oh man, I toured there in 2009.
There
Yeah.
you go. No kidding.
In a past lifetime, I played Frosh Week that year there.
Cool.
Going into there. So I've actually been on the football field. Like I know, and they give us all this Laurier gear. I love
Yeah.
that place. Yeah.
Well, even interestingly enough, like so I applied for grad school at the U of S and came here, and I would have saw like the Laurier play U of S in the Vanier Cup in like
Yeah.
2005 in like Hamilton. Like I just
That's
remember like
awesome.
no context for this school then or anything like that, but it's just kind of like a small world on how things just kind of like align and that type of stuff. So I
Yeah.
ended up lifting weights with like a lot of those guys later on having come here, but it's just a small.
Yeah, absolutely. As soon as I heard that, I was like, Golden Hawks. That's Golden Hawks for sure. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it.
And congrats on the PhD. I have just
Thank you.
I have a couple PhD family members in my, and I just have nothing but absolute respect for the discipline it takes to get there. I've watched people go through it, working on their dissertation, and it's just quite incredible.
Yeah, I think I appreciate that. I do think not that first of all, like I wouldn't say anyone can do it, but it is like when you say discipline, I think that's a huge component of it. Like it's one of those things where like if you're committed to writing, researching, going through the steps, which are definitely very painstaking of doing it. Like many people could go down that path. It's just one of those things where I think what makes it valuable is that like not many people are willing to dedicate X amount of years of their life
Yeah.
to higher education and the process of creating new knowledge and sticking with it. But like I was like I remember thinking earlier too, and a lot of my best learning experiences come from maybe like negative situations where I was like, I don't know if I want to do that, but like something like that. But I'm like, I know I don't want
Yeah.
to do that. But I just remember in undergrad working in a metallurgical lab. Like again, this is with me trying to find my like how to apply my chemistry and that kind of stuff. I grew up in Windsor, Ontario, which is like huge automotive sector, and ended up getting a job in a lab where like they tested the aluminum that they were using to like pour engine blocks. And I remember
Wow.
like
Yeah.
coming across a PhD. He was the head of the department, and him having those credentials in a specific way. And I remember just being like, this opened a lot of doors for you, but I can tell you're not happy. Like, could you do something else? And I remember being like, there's something there, but if you read for long enough, you can do whatever you want.
Oh, man, I love that sentence there. That right there is perfect. Was there, or what was the moment, or how did it look like? If it was it stretched out over a longer time, or any single thing you can think of that when you were trying to decide, okay, like I've done this, I have this going. What was the big motivator for the nutrition aspect?
Yeah, well, I think admittedly when I started this stuff, it was definitely like around a lot more around training, especially right at the beginning, right? Like I was like,
Hmm.
okay, at the same time I was getting into powerlifting and realized that, I mean, that's a whole other discipline of like people lifting weights for competition. Like that's interesting and that kind of stuff. And really, like a lot of us find that like, hey, we can crush it in the gym and stay pretty dedicated and do a lot of the right things, but none of it really matters unless we're watching the huge component of what we eat and where that those nutrients come from and how that how that looks and stuff. So there's like a few key moments where it was like, hey, I got to pay more attention to this stuff. And I think maybe my getting foray into nutrition was like a lot of us in terms of consuming knowledge that was kind of like piecemeal together of like a lot of rules, a lot of things that lacked context, but like you started doing them and following them, and you kind of became that
Hmm.
person of like people are looking to you for advice and that kind of stuff. But it's like maybe you can't really replicate it. Maybe it's all over the place. I think about like just basic ideas of like carbs being bad, need to eat more frequently, eat more protein, like these things where it's like you kind of like learn more about this stuff and you start compiling almost like this list of things you do. And I was
Yeah.
super into it that, but it wasn't until I was like, hey, there's a science to this stuff in terms of like actual underlying principles that
Yeah.
influence how we look and how we perform that I started to really like be able to take it to the next level and do it with others. Most importantly, would be the
Yeah.
biggest thing. So it was kind of like, hey, people are studying this stuff. What does that look like from a principle perspective? And starting to apply that. And not only when I started being able to do it for myself and those around me, I started to see that hey, there's a bigger vision for this as well as like that was the beginning of coaching for me.
Yeah. I have a quick follow up to that. It was a wonderful answer. The From when you made this decision and you saw this kind of unfolding in front of you, what are some of, because we've all like I got in the same way around the same time. I loved sports and I was like hanging out in the gym and I'm like, oh, figure this out. But there was those kind of like bro science rules back then.
Totally.
And then we all just told each other it was set in stone. And I think one of the best parts of aging and having these conversations and so many platforms to discuss this is we see how many of those are shattered. and new things are made. And a lot of people, I find, especially in exercise nutrition, get really like draw a lot of boundaries without getting into, or a lot of lines in the sand without getting into like the real, like, science behind it. So I'd love to chat about, I know if I was listening, this is what I would want to hear. What are some of those things that were your absolute, this is set in stone to me, that have completely changed over your research?
Yeah, I there's been a few like instances where like to me there's like definitely at the beginning like a I would say like a bit of morality around food. Like I needed to eat a certain way and thought I was doing it right, like in terms of like nutrient dense foods, I'm only eating that. Anything that isn't that just has no place in my life. Like that's like at the beginning it was a lot like that. I remember a few times I'd start training with um I had a few training partners. Now one is like a sports psychology prof at Western. And I remember like we had this really kind of interesting group of like four, six, seven lifters at Laurier. We got this powerlifting program going, and a lot of us ended up doing like grad school or continuing on. It was kind of like I don't know, almost like misfits in terms of like we weren't really playing conventional sports. Maybe some of us were, but like kind of dabbling in other things. But either way, I remember one specific instance, me like rushing to get my protein shake after a workout and looking over at this guy, and he had like maybe one of those mini boxes of Fruit Loops that like you like the kids that you travel with kind of thing. And I remember
Yeah.
him like busting that
The
open and
best.
eating it and being like thinking like, man, should you like shouldn't you not be doing that? Like the processed carbs, like isn't that gonna like I don't know, like kind of light switch around like be bad for you, not be good, that kind of stuff. And I remember him just looking at me point blank and being like, I don't believe in that. And I remember being
Yeah.
like, hey, that's interesting. In terms of
Yeah.
like someone just having a real strong stance on stuff and that kind of thing. And then maybe thinking like, hey, maybe there's less good and bad around this, but maybe there's just better or worse within the context of what someone needs to be doing on an individual level,
Yeah.
and being good most of the time, and how it kind of like the checks and balances of a bunch of decisions around food and the science that kind of you know underlies them. And I remember at that moment being like, there's more to this than just that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of like how I started getting into it, and then just um, through application of this stuff. And then I think a big thing being like there's so much to be said about evidence-based training and nutrition and kind of where it's went, and there's pros and cons of all of it. But when I think finally probably started people realizing that like, hey, there's things that matter a lot more and things that don't matter as much, it allowed us to start putting context around like what people really truly need to focus on regardless of their beliefs or dieting styles or whatever it is. There's things that matter the most. So that's kind of when we started being like, hey, here's
Yeah.
this is why calories matter. This is why, different diet compositions matter and that type of thing, and starting to look at it that way.
I love that. I have one more follow up that I was saving for later, but you really cued me on that. And
Yeah.
then I'm gonna let Bryce take over here. How much of this do you think, or what are your thoughts on the belief of a person? If someone believes truly to their like full subconscious, I believe this is good for me. What do you think of that? As opposed to someone who has come up in a different circumstance and just has an absolute mental block on whatever style of nutrition. If that kind of makes sense there.
I I as someone that really truly does believe in the scientific method and getting
Yeah.
uncovering the truth around things, I think it's so important to guide us around like what is true and what is right.
Yeah.
So that's on one side. With that being said, like I'm not a nutrition slasher. I think when things work for people, they work for people. And as long as like we can kind of be like, this is why, like maybe you feel like that it's that way, but this is why. If you keep doing
Yeah.
it and it's working, like to each their own. Kudos to you. Um, I think belief in terms of if you feel like something's going to work and are really committed to it, that is more important than if it's quote unquote right or correct or
Absolutely.
founded in science would be the biggest thing. I remember thinking like, so for example, we started learning more about nutrition. For the longest time, a lot of people did like calorie cycling and carb cycling around like, hey, you know, I got a very strenuous training day. I'm going to allocate more of my food to that day. And the next day it'll be lower and that'll help improve my body composition. And it's because of these like highs and lows around energy expenditure and that type of stuff. That was a big way of thinking for a long period of time. And then people are like, hey, well, if calories matter the most and, glycogen resynthesis takes longer periods of time. It isn't just what happens in hours. Like maybe this stuff doesn't matter. You can just eat like a normal level of food all the time and train pretty hard. I remember like shifting to that thinking, and the world didn't stop. Everything was
Yeah.
great. I remember working with some competitors though. One was a bikini competitor that like swore by calorie cycling. She's like, I need this. This is what's going
Yeah.
to work for me. And I remember going about it at the beginning, like a straight level of food with her. And lo and behold, things did not move like we
It's
thought they were going to.
fascinating.
Right? Like it's
Yeah,
like
it's
she just,
fascinating.
yeah. And I think it's one of those things where if you believe something is going to work, number one, it doesn't matter what's like quote unquote correct because all of your effort goes into that, like just the momentum around the thing you assume is going to work, right? And it fuels all your decisions. It fuels like your effort in certain things. There's like definitely a science of like positive thinking and belief around certain things. So to me, it's like as you're working with people and assessing what's going to work and what's not going to work, we got to factor that stuff in because you're just going to be fighting an uphill battle with something that just based on you feel like it's quote unquote right, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
I think
I love that.
I think belief also ties into adherence. And I think adherence is huge. And I think adherence is like one of the biggest things when it comes to like any kind of nutrition or diet plan. I hate to use the word diet plan per se, but I think like when you're looking at nutrition in general, I think like adherence is number one. So if somebody believes something's going to work, they're more likely to adhere to it long term and be able to sustain it versus if they don't believe in it fully, I think the adherence will just be lower. When with that deviation and that variance on like a weekly basis, that person would be seeing more change likely, and then in turn that probably reinforce the belief that it's not working.
Yeah, without a doubt. And especially if you get frustrated, then you're not going to continue on with that thing. I think especially so many of the people around us and our clients are going to want to lose fat. Like that's like 90% of goals, right? And a lot of times like that's like it's like a longevity, like it's, you got to do it for long enough for it to actually be meaningful and work, right? So if you believe that's going to work, you're just more likely to do that for the required amount of time.
Yeah, so to kind of segue this conversation along, I know you and I actually knew each other for a while before I actually signed up for the course.
Yeah.
But one thing I found fascinating with your stuff is your take on it. Um, I always kind of saw there being a little bit of an issue with the theory and application sense of things when it comes to a lot of education. But the one thing that I liked about your course and program was that you were big on real hands-on application and trying to focus more on the coaching side of things. Like not that you didn't include the theory, but you were more focused on like the people and how they felt and their performance and everything. So what led you to wanting to do that, having so much background in like education?
Well, I think again, it's just so much of the science is important because it guides us. But to me, like if we can't do anything with it, I think it's just wasted breath. It's wasted effort. Like it's like one of those things where like if we can't use it with real people to help improve their lives, to me it's just like not where I want to be spending my time. And I'd love to tell you that like this stemmed from something specific, but I think it's just a culmination of like watching people struggle with things and focusing on the wrong things and that type of stuff. And I knew like, hey, the science aspect's important because it's what's going to get them results. But I think we need to like be able to apply that to individuals to improve their lives. And if we're not able to do that, like to me, there's just so much stuff that we should really dismiss because it's not a need to know. It's like a nice to know. And I think a lot of like I would say academic minded people and people stuck in that like kind of like theoretical lens just spend way too much time on that. For sure. There's some like really big, even like on social media right now, big people that are like, I don't know, they're when they're like coming down and dismissing like myths and like I don't know, the Stacey Sims example in the last few weeks is a good one where everyone's just like so fired up around her. Not I'm not taking her side or anything, but there's so many people worried about like certain things that probably don't matter that it's just like, what are we doing? So to me, it's like the application piece is huge. Like if we can't use this to improve actual human lives, to me, it's just like in my practice, it's just not worth the energy and time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And this is
Um,
coming from someone that spent a lot of time early on debating things that never change anyone's mind. So it's like to
yeah.
me, like that just it's not. I don't know. Maybe you just get older and are like, no, it's not for
Yeah.
me. Not for
That's
me anymore. Yeah.
that's been my experience with it for sure. In there there seems to be like almost in the way that people gatekeep certain bands and music with nutrition, like exercise-based nutrition specifically, and trainers and exercise theory, there it really seems to ruffle feathers when someone feels challenged. And it's been really wonderful to hear you sound very like, hey, if I was like this, I've grown to be like this way, and it's about, the individual needs. And I love hearing that. Is there anything in that you feel confident saying, like, this is bad, like I don't like this, that you see out there right now? And if that's too controversial, I get it.
No, I think I no, I think if you were to ask me like 8 years ago, some of the only things that we could agree on were like fruits and vegetables were good for you. And I think I can still like I still am very pro like you should be eating plant-based
Yeah,
foods
yeah,
in like 98% of cases.
yeah.
So like just the fact that like there's people eating like this is someone that I'm very pro meat. Like I've ate 200 grams of protein every day for the last like 17 years. I only got there by eating meat in most cases. I'm not saying not to do that, but just the emergence of like just avoiding fruits and vegetables at all costs is just mind-boggling to me. That'd be the thing. I'm just like no. And this, I have friends that do it and stuff, and I'm like, hey, again, like to each their own. Um, but like just for, I would say for most people, like no. The answer is no.
Kind of funny. I
Yeah.
just reacted to a video about that. I did was like I don't know if you guys saw it. It was like an 18-year-old kid in the States who was like big
Owen,
on,
Owen, Owen gets pushed at me
yes,
all the time.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I
yeah,
don't know why.
who just like eats off the cutting board. And I tried to like have a take on it where I'm trying to see the good in it too, because again, I think in like a playing that devil's advocate, right? I think in a sense where he's advocating for people eating more whole food sources, which I think that's great. At least it's not abusing fast food and promoting that too much. But I wanted to do a video on that because I was just like, this is lacking some serious nutrient like
Yeah,
profiles in this stuff too. And again, like for a majority of the population, this isn't going to be feasible or
yeah.
sustainable at all, right? So
First of all, great interpretation and take on the situation. If
thank you.
anyone hasn't looked at any of his content before, like I don't even know. Part of me is like so proud of that kid for like, first of all, he doesn't look 18. He looks like 12. And
13.
this is someone like yeah, someone that grew up like very young looking.
No
Like I'm
shade.
kind of like
Yeah.
to put yourself out there that way in this way that like it's it does come off like this is the way you should eat to be this type of thing. It's kind of that new age, like I don't know, like I don't know, like I don't even know the words to really describe. Like I think when like I think when people talk about toxic masculinity, like I'm like you never like really fully understand. I'm like I don't know if that's it, but I'm like there's something like around this like only eat meat and avocado and like uh
Yeah.
eggs and like he's just showing up and he's doing his thing and it's like all in the effort of
Yeah.
like Christian like it's crazy man. Like to be like did you see the comments? Like so he's getting all
So
this heat
bad.
and still putting himself out there. It's like man, the internet sometimes I don't even know how to um but for someone like that, like I mean, I think he's gonna either like find his way or learn or benefit in some sense. It's just like an
Mm.
interesting, I'd say a case study of all of it. But
Yeah.
yeah, that stuff gets pushed at me all the time. Owen Stubblebond.
I have to look into this now. Um,
It's
and
this
just,
kid, he's like
yeah,
constantly eating like it's kind of like raw milk,
yeah,
steak on he's always eating it on a cutting board. It's like basically everything you could do to trigger people that would be um I think if you want to go into the business side of things, like I think the people that have mastered this stuff seemingly can get almost like everyone mad at them, and I don't know how they do it. But he seems to really have like the people that you don't see it much in the comments, but the people that want to attack him for every certain thing
yeah,
certainly do, and it just I don't know, it gets a lot of attention.
yeah. And just listening to it, it sounds like if it's like my thing is if it works for him, I don't mess with it. If he's trying to tell me it's going to work for everybody, then I would push back a little bit and say that it hasn't been my experience, and we've had different experiences in life, and in my time doing this, what works for some people doesn't work for some people, and finding out that difference is something I find really fascinating. And maybe it's the power of belief, the motivation, if there's any internal like
Yeah,
psychological blocks there too. So you did mention at the start, and kind of putting together some timelines in my head, I think we're probably around the same age here. And if that's true, then we grew up in a time where, yeah, there was threads, and like I like again, like message board here and there, but there was no like Twitter, I think, came out in '09, and that was like, I didn't really understand. That was just funny stuff back then. So in your time in the industry, like what are the pros and cons you've seen as we just advance so far in technology, especially in our industries?
Well, I think we kind of talked about this at the beginning in terms of like the middle ground. And it almost feels like aspects of that are like disappearing. And it's like, okay, there's like the science-based side, like this is what matters on one side. But it almost gets to the point where it's like people kind of position that and put it on a pedestal as like the only thing that matters. And all of a sudden we see the the pendulum swing to the other side of like almost, I don't know if it's reactionary or what it is, where it's like, no, I don't want to do any of that. And could that just be like culturally, like distrust in science? Like we've had a pretty crazy 6 years of things and people like, maybe just like not trusting certain things and sources. But to me, it's almost like there's like this pulls in other directions and it's like the middle is disappearing at times. So to me, it's like,
Hmm.
I think fitness and nutrition in this industry was very much saved by the scientific process and realizing that there's context around the things that matter the most and things that matter the least. But I think at the same time, it's almost been like put on a pedestal that's kind of almost like dismissed a lot of people
Yeah.
that could like, be helped in certain ways. And that's all because it's like you're either right or wrong. Or it's like this what matters most, like this is like the only thing that matters. In reality, there's like so many different ways that we can improve people's lives and our own lives and all that stuff. So to me, it's almost like, yeah, that's been like the biggest change where it's like I think the science process and introducing evidence to like guide the things we do and suggest and how we live and how we act and how we navigate stuff has been really liberating for a lot of people because now we're not carrying around like Tupperware to eat every like 2 hours, right? Like, but at the same time, it's just been also I think it's like left a lot of people or like pushed a lot of people away.
Yeah, I was that Tupperware guy. I had the whole bag, all that meal
The
prep, and
six pack, yeah,
I had nothing to go off other than my heroes did it in the
yeah,
80s, and that was my only and some eating advice I got playing hockey.
yeah.
But it's so funny. I've changed a lot in that world too, and
It
you
was like
see it,
it
man.
was almost like a game of honestly, I call it like a game of like fitness telephone tag, right? Where like the message got passed along from person to person, and by the time it got to you, it was kind of like this like bastardized version of
Yeah,
advice. Um, and like a lot of yeah, it just like wasn't right, or you just listened to the person that was like the biggest or the most jacked, and like a lot of times it
yeah,
was just like they had no idea how they actually got there.
yeah. No one knew
Right?
anything.
So like right? So it's just like a lot of that has changed for the better. But I think we
Yeah,
just find ourselves in a bit of a crossroads around like what to do
we
about it.
we are, and I think in the things I kind of keep an eye on, the industries I keep an eye on, I feel like we, as the pendulum swings, we are starting to seek that middle ground more. Maybe I'm in my own echo chamber with that. I stay away from internet fights and stuff, and that's just my own personal choice because it affects me emotionally too much. It's not good for me at that level. Um, but in that middle ground, it seems to be what we're finding is like if you have someone that you've followed on social media, an influencer, or someone from academia, someone with the credentials that you believe in, and you like what they do, I say build your own team with that. You know, build that team there and find the things that work for you. Whereas before it was like, nope, this is what you do. Like for instance, I was Pumping Iron was a huge movie for me as a kid, and I watch it now and I just laugh. And I like the quote, like even when the Arnold documentary came out, he kind of laughs at it too. And I'm like, man, this was like my Bible back then. But I made Bryce drink an egg, which was something I used to do all the time
Two of them.
15 years ago,
Two of
and
them.
we did it. And I'm like, this is like if you like it,
Yeah.
great, but this is so bad. I
Two of
hate
them.
this. I can't believe I used to do this, and I felt like garbage all day. But that was like my like trophy at the end of a workout when I started putting size on, and I was like, and here's my eggs for that. And I'm like, maybe it was just that, maybe it was simply a bravado thing, but I couldn't believe coming back to it older how silly it seemed in that time.
Oh man. I know like I think honestly though, I think if you don't look back and get like a little embarrassed, like you probably weren't doing it right.
Yeah,
Like, you know what I mean? Like I think it's one of those things, and that's what I think the biggest thing is. I think we should have like frameworks and processes that like guide what we do, but at the end of the day, it just like you got to do what's best for you, and and like be just accepting of different ways of doing it. I think that's the only way of like, it's definitely not the most polarizing thing, and it's not like agreeing with others, or at least like agreeing to disagree. Like it's not, I don't know, I guess the sexiest take, but I think it's all we can do.
It's real though, and it's a real take, and I think that's what, if I was the average person searching through content, searching through leaders in the field who I look up to, I just want someone real, not trying to get something. I understand why people have to hustle businesses, and I've talked to many people that like I really like them, and they do rage bait stuff for, and that's the nature of the beast, and respect, 100%, no judgment on it. Um, for the person listening right now who really wants to know, okay, I need to be told, and they see that doctor name like that I just, that's where my eyes are going to, and I just have just all the adoration for it. What are some of like the Dr. Mark beliefs that you just really would like someone listening to this to know? Like, hey, like I'm starting, like just to help support them in the best way.
I think if you want to get a better sense of what you need to do on an individual level with your nutrition, and how it compares to what is like optimal, like the best way of doing that is getting closer to the objective side of things and tracking what you're eating. Like that's why I'm such a huge proponent of like, hey, you should keep a food journal, and ideally it's a food journal that's easily translated into the actual numbers and serving sizes of the food you eat, because those daily totals of like how you make decisions on a meal to meal basis, how they add up, have a huge control and influence over your body composition, but also your athletic performance. So to me, it's like it's really hard to assess what's working and what's not working if you don't have any control over that stuff. And that's why I'm such a huge proponent of like log your food and take a, like what it looks like, on an objective level, because then it's not something that you have to do forever, but that's what guides like structure and habits moving forward, is getting closer to those numbers, especially at the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree.
For let's say someone is like brand new, and they're wanting to get into working out and also get into nutrition too, and let's say they're, I don't know, we'll use an avatar of somebody who's skinny, they have trouble gaining weight. What would be like your kind of starting analysis for them, and like what would like an intake look like for getting them on the right path? Could even be like your beginning stages of tracking food, all the considerations that you'd factor into it, and kind of having them along their way.
Well, I think what's interesting with tracking in general is that like, okay, yes, the numbers guide things, but it's just like such a great awareness tool around like what people are doing would be the biggest thing, right? So if you've struggled with gaining weight over a period of time, it's probably because, and again, we've all had that scenario where like a hard gainer comes to us and they say like, all I do is eat and I can't gain weight. And it like, if you put your detective hat on, like it makes no sense, right? Like you're like, no, like if you were constantly eating and eating enough, like you would be gaining weight. But in reality is like they do that for a few days and then they can't sustain it, can't keep it up. I kind of go from there. I personally have no like, I don't have much empathy for it. My dad used to say like, hey, you're like gonna get a suntan on your forehead from spending so much time in front of that fridge light, type thing. Like that's what is,
Yeah.
that was. And now that you say that, man, I was like, I remember going home after university and like just cooking steaks with no sides. So maybe I was Owen, now that I think about it. A little bit more.
I still am
Yeah.
there.
um, he's like, you're not gonna eat something with that? I'm like, no.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. But I think the biggest thing being like just getting closer to those numbers would be like, so like track what you're eating for at least 5 days. And if your body weight on average doesn't change by like a half a kilo or a pound, within a flux, like you can get a pretty good sense of, on average, are you close to maintenance calories and what you need to be doing moving forward. And that a lot of times controls for a lot of like individual variation between people would be the biggest thing. So to me, it's like, hey, yes, we can use calculations to get a sense of what Rob should be eating and what Bryce should be eating. And that to me almost sets like a goalpost. But I'd rather you just like get into the swing of things of like tracking your food, seeing what it looks like on an average level for 3, 5, 7 days, and then start to make some benchmarks around how you need to eat moving forward. And then from there, we just set a starting place that can be adjusted. And we do that based on what happens from that point moving forward would be the biggest thing. So instead of just being like, eat more or make sure you're eating this amount of meals per day or including this, it's like, why don't we just control the thing that matters the most, and then work backwards based on that and start to make some recommendations on an individual level.
What would be some key considerations for that individual component that you would factor in for giving somebody calories, just for the listeners?
Well, I think we're always kind of like trying to think of like, okay, how much food someone should be eating should be based on how much energy they're burning relatively, on an average basis, and their goals, right? So like we're always trying to food calorie levels are based on like first of all how much energy someone's burning, and that would be maintenance, right? And then from there, like, hey, are we going to add more in so you can gain weight? Would be the biggest thing and what to look at. So we're always trying to set it like, okay, based on that, what's going to also allow someone to gain weight at an acceptable rate that the majority of it is going to promote like favorable body composition changes would be the biggest thing. So it's like, hey, let's assess and measure and see what that looks like, and then put you in a position to gain a pound a week, ideally, because that'll fall in line with what's going to allow them to gain mostly muscle and not a lot of fat would be the biggest thing. Which is not, again, I'm just so many memories through the ages are popping up for me. That was not one of my first like really. I grew up like I would say like chubbier and wanting to improve my body composition through playing sports, but then started playing, high school football, and like I'm 5'8", but wanted to play linebacker and needed to get really big. I remember gaining like 25 pounds one summer, and doing it through. I was washing dishes at a Greek restaurant, and they would feed me
Oh, that's
at the end of
awesome.
every shift like a
Yeah.
gyro and fries and like a plate of um, Greek salad and
Yeah.
stuff. And I remember just like eating as much as I could, like the rice and all that stuff, like 1,500 calories after a shift, like even more if they would feed me that kind of thing. And I remember gaining a bunch of weight that way. So it's like had I known, and again, it wasn't 25 pounds of like 160 to 185 of like good weight. A lot of it
Yeah.
was fat and that kind of thing. Just going about it differently now. I wish we had the tools of being able to like actually track what I was eating and do it in a way that was, going to set me up for success long term. They also didn't know my name the entire time I worked there. I worked there for 3 months. They called me the boy.
The boy.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. Where's the
That's
boy? He's
that's
not. Yeah.
awesome. Whatever,
Exactly.
you made the money, got the food, and gained the weight. Heck yeah.
Exactly. And we're here.
Perfect. Um, what I would love to hear your thoughts on. So this is something that when it first came out, I didn't really understand. And has worked for me. And when I say that, it has now worked for me for a few years, and I stand by it for myself. I'm growing out of it a little bit. But I was very against it at the start. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on what you think about intermittent fasting.
Yeah. Well, I think if we go back to the some of the beliefs around, hey, I need to eat more frequently to improve my metabolism, and that kind of getting squashed when we started to look at like meal timing and total calorie studies. That blew things open for a lot of people, right? Because it was no longer like I need to eat directly upon waking up and start this process where from there I'm need to eat every 3 hours. So for a lot of people, it's really liberating. Where it's like, okay, if I control the things that matter, which are like overall calories and where those calories are coming from, I can split things up based on preference and not necessarily what I've been told to do. And that was liberating for a lot of people. I was in the same way. 2011, like lean gains came, and Martin Burkhan started talking about like, hey, a lot of what you know about meal timing is just complete BS, like it's not even right. Like you can actually delay your first meal for a lot longer or even fast for a longer period of time and eat as much as you want within a window, right? For a lot of people, that was like, there's no way this is true. This flies in the face of everything we know and have been doing, especially like a lot of successful people have been doing, right? And that's where things get confusing is that like a lot of times you can make a lot of progress in spite of what you're doing, not because of it, right? So a lot of people were like, hey, this doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, delaying your first meal until you're hungry works for a lot of people, myself included. I think, and maybe you'll find this, Rob, in the next little bit and year and so, as you get kids and stuff, and you kind of start eating meals together, like things change a little bit in terms of like, lifestyle wise, what you have going on. But for a lot of people, yeah, I mean, the biggest thing being like, you don't necessarily need to eat upon waking. Breakfast is the meal that breaks the fast, and as long as you're controlling for what happens the rest of the day, that's the most important thing. Not necessarily how you split that up, or if you eat directly upon eating. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it answers it in such a perfect like academia way of like It's very middle way, and I like that, and it's the same thing because I know for me and like listening, if I was younger and starting on my journey, I'd be like, yeah, that sounds like something I would want to try, and I it was just the attitude I had, but I grew up in my dad. We ate the same thing every day. Everything was based around hockey performance. It was at night we had steak, and I had like raw broccoli with it. So he set me up for success. But every morning I had a glass of milk, and I'd have a stomach ache for the rest of the day. And I don't have any opinions on this, but for me, it hurts me. Like 2% proper milk, and I'd have 2 eggs and 4 pancakes every morning from grade 1 to 18 years old. And I used to have hunger pains that were just unbelievable if I didn't have breakfast right upon waking. And now it is gone. I'll feel hungry around 12, and that works for me. And I know my body well, being close to 40 now, like I know when I'm malnutritioned. I know when I'm over. And then that kind of leads into it. Like as
Yeah.
much as you can know about yourself, and there's so many systems you can use right now to get even more information. And that's really like that individualization.
Yeah.
Whereas it was blanket statements before, and I still believe there's some truth to a lot of those blanket statements. Like there's those basic, like obviously, let's segue into a little bit of macronutrient. And like, when I was taking my powerlifting and weight gain as serious as possible, I just lived by my macros, worked for me, and then I kind of fell off of it a little bit, and I don't take it as serious. Maybe the protein side for sure, but just like I'd love to just talk a little bit more about kind of like your take on macros, how you run that. So what do you think the most proper system is based on individual person, that kind of thing?
Well, I think, and this is where I think a lot of times, whatever we have optimal levels around, like for different sports, different demands, like that kind of stuff. And there's like differing things. For the longest time, it's like endurance, your focus is on carbs and like it should be there. And strength sports, it was always like you're generating power, you're probably going to need more protein and focus on that. Maybe overall calories don't matter as much. And there's kind of like almost like these camps of like that kind of stuff, where I think that gets like confusing for a lot of people, especially people that kind of like are getting into this stuff and are trying to find out what's going to work for them, as well as maybe like they're coaching others and getting into nutrition. It's like they start to think about like, okay, the textbook says that these are the optimal levels, and therefore I'm going to like encourage and tell someone to do that right there. And I think what gets like a little bit confusing is that like sometimes from the place where someone is to where they need to be, there's like too big of a stretch to get there. So what we teach is that like, hey, let's get a sense of what you're doing now, and what that looks like, and move you towards a more optimal macronutrient breakdown and split. Like moving towards those things. So for a lot of people, like they're not going to be eating enough protein, but going from 1.0 grams per kilogram of protein today to right to 2 and doubling your intake right off the bat is just going to be overkill for so many people. Like it's going to be way too much. They're going to be like their habits, their knowledge, like everything that they have set up with how they eat is like it's just going to be overkill at the beginning, and that could like actually push them away. Some might be able to do it and they survive, but that's not the point, right? It's like what's going to work for most people. So it's like, okay, let's get a sense of what Rob is doing right now and how that looks, and then makes them some targets and some recommendations based on where you are compared to where we feel like you should be, and some steps and middle ground along the way, so that you can your habits, beliefs, knowledge, what you buy, all those things will catch up as you make improvements would be the
Yeah,
biggest thing.
yeah,
I can't tell you how many times vegan clients have come to me saying like, you know, I'm starting to lift weights. I know this protein thing is important. I'm having a hard time getting anywhere close to where someone said I should be doing, especially considering like like plant-based proteins aren't going to be as high quality. Like this is all too overwhelming. I'm just not going to do it at all. And thinking like, well, that's not right. Like that's going to backfire, and that's based on like what people are suggesting to them, right? Where it's like,
yeah, of
okay,
course.
instead of you eating 60 grams of protein per day, like can we get you to 100, and maybe it's not 140, but like is that 40-gram difference going to make a big difference for you? Yes, like without a doubt it is. So it's like, what should someone's diet look like? It's like it should look similar to what it is now, just moving towards optimal. And in most cases, that means adding in more protein and
Yeah.
probably arranging carbs and fat in a way that fits within their calorie goals or what they need to be doing to make progress would be the biggest thing, but not making so drastic changes that they can never catch up to things.
Yeah.
And I think that's what maybe people that aren't as on board with food tracking and macro tracking kind of see as the drawback of it, which it is. If you kind of live and die by those numbers, and if you're just like, just
Hmm.
focus on habits, but to me, it's like you gotta find the middle ground with both of those things and move towards optimal. And that's kind of like what our, I guess, our recommendations and educational philosophy is based on. Is that like you need structure, which is these numbers that should guide decisions and requirements and someone's goals. And then the coaching process is like the action steps and habits that fills those structures.
Yeah.
And you need both of those things. And to me, this over here is like evidence based, the textbook kind of like dry. And this is kind of like feels good, habit based, kind of wishy washy at times, but important. But it's like the things that fill that structure, and we need both of those things. And I think most conventional educational resources and certifications and stuff just kind of lean too far in one direction or the other.
So following up on that, before we segue into conclusions, what for the average listener right now they're starting their journey, they're like, I have so many different things I've seen, heard, pseudoscience here, like little trends that have come and gone. I don't know what to do. What are three simple things that you really believe in can be built off of for that? Like whether it's, focus your hydration, things like that. Just three steps or like three things you feel very confident in.
I think you, I think if I could give you like the 30-second, this is the nutrition advice you need to take away from it kind of
Perfect.
thing, it would be like every time you eat, you need to be consuming like 20 to 40 grams of protein. Ideally include a fruit and or vegetable, and eat in a way that makes you feel full, and not overdo it and eat when you're hungry. And if you did those things within that structure, 90% of health problems would go away. Be it like because you're focusing on usually unprocessed foods, or have to because you included those things. You're doing it in a way that like, you know, fills that structure and kind of like puts some checks and balances around how much total food you're eating. And you're just filling it with like high quality foods would take care of most of the bases for a lot of people.
If I had that 30 seconds of information 15 years ago, I could have saved myself from a lot of stuff, man.
Oh yeah,
I
me
appreciate
too.
that.
I completely agree. Like the amount of
Yeah.
things that I did and tried, and again got to where I am in spite of what I was doing. Like it's just, um, maybe it was necessary, maybe it wasn't,
Yeah,
but it definitely could have
absolutely.
saved a lot of, yeah, headaches and frustration for sure.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you, Mark, for coming on today. This was awesome. And I think there's a lot of big takeaways within this episode, especially for just anybody that's maybe wanting to get into more of the nutrition coaching side of things, or for someone who's just wanting to take their training and their lifestyle to that next level. So, for people that want to learn more about your course, your program, follow you on like your YouTube, on Instagram, and everything, where can they do so?
Yeah, so the best place, if you want to learn more about the program, you can go to nutritioncoachingacademy.com and get all the details about the program and how we run things, investment, start dates. If it's the right fit for you, you can learn more about that there. And the place I'm probably most active on for creating content would definitely be my YouTube. So if you go to at Dr. Mark Morris, MARC, you'd find my YouTube channel there, and that's something that we put considerable effort into, and just like creating long form content. So go check that out.
Awesome. Yeah, no, thank you very much for your time. It's always great to talk to you, and I've learned a ton from you. So this has been really good.
Yeah, we'll
Awesome.
have to have you back on for sure.
Sounds good. I'd be happy to be back at any time, and it sounds like there's going to be some big life changes the next time I'm on, hopefully. So
We'll see.
I'm excited to dive into that too.
Perfect. Amazing.
Okay, cool.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Have a great day, man.
Thank you.
Bye.